Can you hear me? Yes? Okay. There we go. Maybe a little bit further. There we go. I think we're good. Thank you, Pastor Shannon. Good evening. My name is Betsy Johnstone, and I am feeling so incredibly honored and blessed to have the opportunity to speak to you all here tonight. And if I may, I'd like to start right off with a question. I'd like to ask you, how do you respond when you are presented with a new challenge? Maybe a project, an initiative, maybe something that's a little out of your comfort zone. Are you one of those people who says, oh yes, bring it on, and you plunge right in? Or do you say, I need to think about that a little bit? Or do you respond with, no, absolutely not, I don't want to do that? Well, I'm going to confess to you all tonight that I tend to have a knee-jerk response like that last one far too often. But what if that challenge comes from God? How do we respond? I can just tell you that He is infinitely patient with my stubborn self. Throughout my 25 years of advocating for mental illness, my journey has been full of prompts, resistance, and thankfully guidance from the good Lord above to move ahead with His plan and not my own. One day in February 2024, so about a year and a half ago, I was taking an afternoon walk in the woods. I live way out in the county. I was by myself, and I heard a voice. I distinctly heard a voice, and the voice said, "You're not doing enough in your own community." And I looked around and said, what? Again, the same message, the same voice. You're not doing enough in your community. And then I knew who was talking to me, right? I knew who was talking to me. And I said, well, Lord, what else do you want me to do? I've just written a book. I've created a Facebook page to help people with mental illness. What else do you need me to do? And then it wasn't a voice. It was a banner. And on the banner, it said, the Mental Health Connection.
Wow.
And I thought, So I'm walking back to the house and I'm shaking my head. I'm shaking my head in resistance. I didn't want to take on something else, but I prayed about it. I prayed for days about it. And slowly God worked in my mind and in my heart to help me to take the first steps. Well, since it was God who was speaking to me, I figured whatever this mental health connection was, it needed to be faith-based. But where to start? Well, there are 5 churches here in this community in Edenton who for years have had ecumenical Holy Week services before Easter. And so, Pastor Shannon, one of those churches here, Pastor Shannon and 4 other local pastors were on my list to contact and see if I could get them on board with whatever this mental health connection was going to be. I met individually with Pastor Shannon and 4 other local pastors, and these meetings were remarkable. They were so blessed. Pastor Shannon shared his experience and training in suicide awareness and prevention, particularly among the African American community. Amen. And I thought, wow, I'm on to something here now. I met with 2 new preachers in town, Pastor Kobe Strauser over at Edenton Baptist and Melody Purdue at the Episcopal Church, and individually, they were new to town. They didn't know me from Adam's House Cat. And they each shared about childhood trauma that they had lived through, extreme childhood trauma that later led to some mental disorders for them, anxiety and depression. I met with Father Hyro at Catholic Church. That's a long story. I'm Catholic convert. That's a long story. We won't go into that right now. And the Methodist minister, Elizabeth Pope, they were also very receptive as I proposed a series of gatherings with a focus on mental health that would take place in a church setting. All 5 pastors signed on, and they agreed to host future gatherings to raise awareness about mental illness. And starting last fall, we had all 5 gatherings between September and February, and they were so well received. But I needed help to get that going. So I asked some members from these different churches if they would be willing, and I had an idea of who might be interested, if they would serve on a steering committee. And so together we formed the Mental Health Connection. And that is how I come to be standing before you here tonight. First of all, you need to know I am not a mental health professional. I taught music in schools, and I was the music director for many churches for 25 years. So how did I become involved with mental health, specifically mental illness? Well, I'd like to share our family story. There's always a story, right? I have an adult son who lives with bipolar disorder. It used to be called manic depressive disorder. Anybody heard of this before? Yeah, okay. All right. He experienced severe, sudden onset of bipolar disorder in 1996 when he was just 13 years old. I never even heard of bipolar disorder at the time. For 20 years now, since he began to move into solid recovery, I begin and I end each day in awe of God's miracle that is our son.
Amen.
Before this miracle, though, there were what I called the black years. Those were the hours, the days, the weeks turning into years that were filled with the unknown, the panic, the anger, the isolation, the fear, the grief over the child who seemed dead, never to return to the carefree little boy he once was. Anyone will tell you that recovery doesn't come easy for those who are trying to seek it, to find a doctor, to find the right combination of meds that can be tolerated. So how did we arrive at this rare place of recovery? First of all, prayer. All right?
Amen.
Praying to God. But God also leads us to seek therapy. God can work through doctors and therapy. We all know that.
Amen.
Medication, family advocacy, constant tweaking, and tons of patience.
Amen.
For 3 years, he was in a lockdown institute, a day school, but it was a lockdown therapeutic school. It was horrible, but guess what? It saved his life.
Amen.
It saved his life. 7 years it took to try to get the medication so that it worked and he could tolerate side effects. And now, it's time to tell you something good. Our son lives in Tennessee. He's 41 years old. He lives outside Nashville. He has his own successful music management company. He married an angel who brought him to Jesus. 2 years ago, he was baptized. He was baptized when he was younger, but he wanted to be baptized again. He and his wife have a beautiful home, and they have 2 precious children. These are all major life events I thought were impossible during those dark years. But there is hope, and that is God's promise to us. And hope begins with all of us here tonight. So let's talk a little bit about mental illness. If you don't remember anything else I said or talked about tonight, I want you to remember this. Mental illness is a serious medical illness. I'm going to say it again. Mental illness is a serious medical illness. It includes depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and there are a few more. It is treatable for most individuals. Untreated, it can have some terrible, very long-term consequences. What causes mental illness? There's no easy answer to that question. Most mental illnesses are caused by a combination of factors. But I'm going to tell you this. Mental illness is not caused by bad parenting.
Amen.
And it's not caused by demons.
All right now.
It's not caused by demons.
Amen.
Genetics can play a role. There can be an underlying genetic predisposition that doesn't manifest itself as a mental illness until there's a trigger. So what are some of these triggers? It can be abuse. It can be a serious physical injury. It can be trauma. It could be a financial crisis, a work-related crisis, maybe unexpectedly getting fired, a family or relationship issue, a divorce or an estrangement from family members. But the bottom line is that that a single cause of mental illness is unlikely. There's no simple test to identify a mental illness, but there are signs and there are symptoms that we can look for to say it's time to get some help. So, indulge me in a little exercise in identifying signs of mental illness. What mental illness comes to mind if you see someone who's having drastic changes in their mood, behavior, personality, sleeping habits, feeling sad or withdrawn for more than 2 weeks,
Depression.
significant weight loss or gain? Any mental illness come to mind?
Depression.
Exactly, depression. What mental illness comes to mind if you see someone who has severe, out-of-control, risk-taking behavior that could cause harm to themselves or others that alternates with periods of sadness and tiredness? So you have the highs and the lows. Anybody?
Bipolar.
Yes, bipolar disorder, what my son is living with. What mental illness comes to mind if you see someone who is seeing, hearing, or believing things that aren't real? And there's some people that walk right around Edenton here who are talking out loud to someone who's not there. Does a mental illness come to mind? Schizophrenia. What mental illness comes to mind if you see someone who has sudden overwhelming fear for no reason, sometimes with a racing heart, physical discomfort, difficulty breathing, intense worries or fears that get in the way of daily activities? What comes to mind?
Anxiety.
That was a big response there. So many people living with anxiety, even young people today living with anxiety. Now we're going to talk just a little bit about signs of suicide. Individuals who are living with a mental illness such as depression, for example, they can move into recovery with therapy and the right medication. But sometimes their symptoms will suddenly worsen. They may even need a brief hospitalization to get stabilized. But people have told me living with serious depression, when their symptoms get that bad, there's a darkness that starts to close in. And it closes and closes in. And it shuts out the light and the love of their friends and family. And they may be thinking about taking their life. They may be thinking about suicide to end their pain. That's all they can feel is their pain. Most people who are thinking about suicide do exhibit some warning signs that we can look out for in what they say and what they do. It can begin with saying things like, sometimes I just wish I'd never been born. There are people that say that. Social withdrawal. Where's Deborah? I haven't seen Deborah in a while. She hadn't been to church. I haven't seen her at the social events, the coffee shop, or wherever we usually get together. Need to check on Deborah. Putting their affairs in order. Giving away possessions. Even giving gifts to family when there's no occasion for giving a gift, right? Those are things to look out for. Looking for a way to kill themselves, such as buying a gun, or raiding someone else's medicine cabinet looking for pills, opioids. What can we do? Start a conversation with someone you feel may be thinking of harming themselves. You can say something like, I've been thinking about you lately. I have not seen you. Are you okay? Is something bothering you? How about we get together? And if you do get together, sit down in a quiet and private space. Tell them, I'm concerned. I'm here to listen. It's okay, listen to this, it's okay to ask someone if they have thought about harming themselves. They will usually tell you. And I have been in situations like this. They will usually tell you. Asking will not put the idea in their head. Ask them if they have a plan and a means to carry it out? If so, stay with them. You can call the Suicide Crisis Hotline, which is 988, offer to call 911, offer to take them to the emergency room. And then when you're saying these things and all of a sudden their demeanor changes and they say, oh, you know, I'm feeling better now. I'll be all right. You can go. I'm feeling better now. Don't ever believe that. You stay, and if they won't let you help them, then you insist on contacting right then and there a family member. You either call them or text them, you tell them exactly what's going on, and they need to come immediately, and you stay until they arrive. And now it's that time again to tell you something good. About time, right? There is hope for people living with mental illness. It's absolutely possible for individuals to move into recovery, to resume their work, their school, their church, and their relationships. Everyone responds differently, but treatment, which usually includes therapy and medication, it does work for so many people living with mental illness. Support from family members is essential. I learned this the hard way, especially early on when those symptoms are severe. A person in the early stages of mental illness, they're not usually capable of taking the steps they need to move into recovery. For example, getting to a therapy appointment on time, getting their prescriptions filled, putting them in an organizer tray so that, you know, they know when they've taken them, taking them on time. So it's really important to have a family member or friend, an advocate, who can help them move into recovery. Amen. Now, the individual with a mental illness is suffering, but guess what? The whole family is suffering. Right. All right? They need the support of our church community. All right? Let's look at some of the ways that we as Christians can help. First of all, we take a stand against fear and stigma.
That's right.
Everybody knows what stigma is, right? Okay. Does language matter?
Yes.
Are there some things that are not helpful to say when someone's struggling, maybe with depression or anxiety? Can you think of some things that aren't helpful?
You crazy.
You crazy. Yeah, how about, what you got to be so sad about? You're so blessed, you know? How about pick yourself up and get over it? You're not praying hard enough.
Right.
Right? You need to pray harder to get over this. Yes, we need to pray, but we need to look at the whole picture. You mentioned words like crazy. That's not helpful. Psycho. We need to support treatment and recovery. Don't be afraid to ask. You could say something like, I know your family has been going through a hard time. Are you finding the help that you need? You don't need to offer the help, but you can just show that you care, and that will mean so much to someone. Offer meals and assistance. Let me ask you something. When someone in your church dies, gets cancer, seriously injured, has surgery, what do y'all do? You call them, you visit them, you send them cards, you send them meals. Of course you do, right?
Amen.
Well, sadly, that doesn't always happen, rarely happens for families who are living with mental illness. When our family was struggling so many years ago, we felt so alone and isolated. And I remember thinking, where's the casserole? Where's the casserole? Other ways you can help. You could offer to pick up an online grocery order. Can I pick that up for you and bring it over? Pick up a prescription, maybe offer transportation. You know, maybe there's a child that needs to get to a therapy session and parents are working. You know, all kinds of ways you can help. We can offer the gift of presence. We can reach out to an individual or family. It can be a text message. That's so easy nowadays, right? Is there a good time for me to stop by? Would you like to go out for coffee? Can I take you out for lunch? And if you get together, just be ready to listen and share the journey. You don't need to try to fix it. You don't need to have solutions. Just be present and listen. And I have found sometimes just sitting in silence with someone. Hold them in thought and prayer. You might ask if you're with them, may I offer a prayer right now? Or you can text a prayer. You can email a prayer. And that will mean so much to them. Now, before I close, I'd like us to think for a moment about the people in the Bible that suffered the most stigma, isolated and shunned by society for something they couldn't help. I'm talking about people afflicted with leprosy. Imagine their shame and their hopelessness. And what example did Jesus give? Jesus reached out to them. Jesus approached them with love and compassion. Jesus healed them. Now, we can't heal someone with mental illness, but like Jesus, we can reach out, right? Like Jesus, we can approach them with love and compassion. As Christians, we can be the instruments of hope. As Christians, as a Christian community, we can shine the light of love and understanding to those who are in their darkest moments. Together as Christians, we can make mental health a priority and be part of the solution. Together as Christians, we can educate ourselves and fight stigma. Together as Christians, we can let individuals and their family members know they are not alone. Amen. Amen. Thank you for having me.